Hey everyone, I'm Scott Stokely and welcome all of you. I want to say I'm excited to be here, and that would be a half truth because we're also very sad to be here because this evening we're going to remember a close friend to many of us, but someone also deeply important to the entire flying disc community, not just our current world of disc golf and ultimate, but disc sports in general. PDGA 002, Victor Malafronte, who we lost just a few days back. And we are going to have this memorial for him online for two purposes. Number one, we're going to celebrate Victor's life with all of his friends and family and those who knew him, which there are many. But also, we're going to hopefully share about somebody who's very important to our sport, to a modern audience who may not know where our sport came from. And so not only are we going to celebrate Victor's life, but we're going to celebrate, I think at the same time, and Victor would approve, we're going to celebrate all of the pioneers of our great sport. Victor represents one of many people that we wouldn't be here without. But before we begin, Victor's niece, Heather, put together a little piece, which we're going to play to celebrate Victor from Victor's family. And we'll let all of the friends from around the world join in. So please cue up Heather's piece.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melt like raindrops away above the chimney tops. That's where somewhere.
All right, we are going to bring back, there we go. We're going to bring back John Kirkland and Dan Roddick. Thank you, Heather, for that beautiful piece. We'll make sure that we post it to my social media as well. But with me, I have two people who knew Victor far better than myself. PDJ number 3, Stork, Dan Roddick, and PDJ number 100, because that was his IFA number. He was actually one of the first several members to join the Professional Disc Golf Association, John Kirkland. Thanks, you guys, for being here.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for doing this, Scott. Victor would appreciate it.
Yeah, it's funny when people ask me, when they say, well, you knew Victor Malafronte, they ask me the same way. They say, did you know Ed Hedrick? And my response is, yes, we all did, because we were such a tight, much smaller family back in those days. But again, you all knew him better than me. Would you each tell me where you met Victor and where it all began with you and Victor?
Dan, go ahead.
No, I want to talk about time and my surprise because I watched that slideshow several times and didn't previously cry, and I'm not a crier, so that was a surprise. Um, we always have amazing amount of trouble grasping the sweep of time. I mean, you ask the typical person on the street, like the dinosaurs, like were they longer than we were here, or about the same, or whatever, and they go, "Oh, wow, that's a hard one." And I guess about the same, like Dino and Barney, and about the same probably. The dinosaurs were here 165 million years. They were gone for 66 million, and we've been here 6 million. And the Frisbee time version of that, Frisbee time, is Scott pulls in to do a clinic, and these kids think that he's ancient. Oh my God, you've been around forever, ever. And he makes a point of saying, no, no, I'm relatively new. And I know people who either have or say they could have had single digit PDGA numbers. That was for you, John. And
What's
and
your
for
IFA
me,
number again?
I kind of lost it. For me, I started playing in 1953. It was 20 years of playing until I met Victor at IFT. 20 years. And when I ran into the Berkeley people and Victor, I I felt like I didn't know anything. They I felt like a kid. They're saying, now you see this number on the bottom side. I've been playing for 20 years. I never noticed the number. Okay, see this number? That means something. These are all different. You can throw it this way. I mean, I was completely gobsmacked. I mean, that couldn't even manage it in my brain after 20 years of doing that. And the thing is that at that time, Sproul Plaza, Berkeley, was the fertile crescent of Frisbee. I mean, it was the center of everything, and one could argue that Victor was the king of the crescent. I mean, as you'll see from the images that come across here, it was unbelievable. I mean, he was mind blowing, as John will say. Uh, the first forehand I ever saw was Victor's at IFT, and I thought my eyes were going to fall out of my sockets. We were convinced after reading Stansel's book that he made it up. We had tried; it was impossible. And then here's the Mott Sidewinder. I'm just saying the guy was a force of nature, and everybody wanted to be Victor.
I also have been playing a long time. I didn't start until relatively late, the summer of '57, the first year that they made actually they hadn't made a Frisbee yet. It was a Pluto platter, and they decided that Pluto platter didn't roll trippingly off the tongue, and they came up with the word Frisbee and changed its spelling. There's a whole story there. But anyhow, I started playing in '57, and I thought that I was the center of it until 1973. Just Dan was saying, actually, it was 1972, and I saw a quick little clip, which I hope we'll see from the Great American Dream Machine, of just what, and it was just on quickly, and it just you guys will see it, but it shows that group from Berkeley back in those days. In addition to Victor, it had Bob May, Chuck Schultz, Dave Book, and other luminaries. And I think Dave Book is actually the guy that taught Victor how to throw a forehand. Anyhow, um, as Stork said, and I've said elsewhere, Victor, when I met him in '73 at IFT, he blew my mind. And your mind can only get blown once. I mean, I've seen Stokely do amazing things. I've seen Simon. I've seen all kinds of stuff, but none of it had the visceral, emotional impact of watching Victor. I I mean, I walked up and blathered some stuff about something, blah blah blah, and then he and I just went out into a field, and I just ran down the other end about 60 yards away. I'm thinking I'm going to get I'm going to get far away from this guy. I'm going to show him what I got. He sails this behind the back forehand that goes way up in the air like a big TRC and just falls right in my lap. And I about needed to change my clothing. And after that, I said to myself, self, you got to learn every single thing you can. Just play with this guy. He was the center of the Frisbee universe. And the fact that he's gone is a terrible thing, but it comes to all of us. I don't doubt that, all of us here, one day is going to be, oh, I remember that old guy. So it's a shame that we've lost him. But I think that he would enjoy this tribute.
Well, and I'm going to jump in with I don't know if it's my first memory because I was young or the first time I met him, but I can tell you my memory. But I'll back up by saying I would be willing to bet that I say the name Victor Malafronte more frequently than anyone in our sport today. And the reason why is because at least once a week, somebody comes up to me or introduces me as, oh, you're the guy that invented the sidearm. And 100% of the time, I will correct them and tell them, no, there were players who mastered the sidearm before I ever threw my first sidearm. And I mentioned Victor Malafronte in that rebuttal. But my first memory of Victor, which I think I talked about with him on my podcast, was we were at hole 3 at La Mirada. And it was a right-handed backhand hyzer shot. There was a left-handed hyzer shot, but you had to throw a vertical, a really steep shot because of how understable the Frisbees were. There was no way to throw like a spike hyzer with a sidearm physically. And then Victor says on the tee pad, he says to me, no, you just throw it behind your back. That'll put more angle on it. He threw from the tee pad of hole 3 behind his back and hit the basket. And I think I was 12 then, maybe 13. And like you, I went, oh, LA Dodgers, LA Lakers, never heard of them. The Oak Grove Gophers, Victor Malafronte, and the likes were my heroes growing up. So I also have that same experience. First time with Victor.
Scott, in talking to people, getting ready for this, I ran into so many people, from kids to, my longtime buddy, Jimmy Scala, and others who say, Victor specifically took time to help me, and he was so amazingly kind. I mean, here's this God-like figure, and he takes a moment to come over and talk to me about my grip. And just an amazing thing, because that's an unusual combination of maintaining, it's hard to be up on the pedestal and still reach down and touch hoi polloi. I mean, that's a long reach. And but many people reported that to me, and it kind of surprised me because I didn't really fully know that side, but countless folks said that.
So I'm gonna pause periodically because I have some old clips of Victor that people, I think both of you as well, have sent me. So Victor was the first mainstream, is that correct? The first mainstream Frisbee star. We played the commercial. Got a little commercial that's pretty amazing. This is young Victor. And we'll segue into it. There we go.
I started drinking beer because of this. Specifically.
All right, here we go.
Never had one. Didn't even really know it existed, really.
Victor Malafronte does things with 108 grams of pure polyethylene that no other man can do, and he makes it look easy. And after he makes handling the Frisbee look easy, he looks forward to an ice-cold glass of beer that tastes easy. Schmitz. Victor knows that Schmitz drinks easy and goes down easy. And for Victor Malafronte, easy does it. You tell the world you know what you're doing. Every time you reach for Schmitz. The easy beer.
All right. Amazing.
I should step out and make room for your next guest here if we're gonna get
I
them
think
on
we should do
about the
that.
time.
And actually, before we bring the guest on, actually hang out with us for just about 5 more minutes, Dan. One of the things that Victor has done is he was the first Frisbee player, along with John, to make their living throwing Frisbees. And I would love, and I got a little bit of special video to show as well. John, will you tell us just a quick story about how you and Victor made your living throwing plastic circles?
Well, after running into Victor at the 1973 IFT, I said, okay, well, I'm all about this from now on. I went out and visited them at something they call the Berkeley Big Game Week. And it was a tournament where you could see how high you could throw. And Small Plaza is in Berkeley. It's got 4 big dorms around it. So it's all hemmed in. And the distance was how high you could throw up against the building. And there was trick shot accuracy, and there was distance. Oh, I see that. Are you playing that?
We're going to play it in the background.
Right. That's us touring. Well, to make a long story short, I decided that I wanted to start doing anything I could to basically to showcase Frisbee and to show off because it was fun. And I did a few Boston Celtics games, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could play indoors all winter, play in front of basketball? And a little light bulb went off in my head, and I said, Harlem Globetrotters. And I said, well, obviously, if I'm going to do the Harlem Globetrotters, there's only one guy I'm going to do it with is Victor. And we got an audition with him in this little hot gym in New Hampshire. And the disc was slippery and we played like crap. And they said, thanks, kids, but no thanks. And a couple of weeks later, I flew Victor and me to Chicago, and where Jordan played, the big Coliseum there, and said, come down and check us out again. Anyhow, they hired us. We did 200 cities in 180 days. And it doesn't sound like such a big deal, except that we're in front of thousands of people every night. And we turned millions of people on to Frisbee that had never thought of it as being a sport, as being an athletic thing. And it was the first time that a whole lot of people got to see it. And Victor was a dream to play with just because he was so coordinated, had all these cool ideas. We would do the multiple skips and giant throws out over the audience. It was a magical time. And this is what we're seeing right now is we're keeping 4 of them going and skipping along the floor. We're juggling 4 from one end to the other. We would sit in chairs under the basket and play catch. We would have contests to see who could make 3/4 baskets. We had shootouts. It was 20, 30 minutes sometimes of just turning the kids on. And Victor was one of these guys that when the pressure was on, he performed magnificently. He was a guy that thrived on the pressure. I think he was a kid from Brooklyn who whose childhood was sort of interrupted by the loss of a parent, and the other parent remarried, and there were a lot of kids, and he kind of didn't get the attention he wanted, so he got out of high school, went straight into the Marines, and then he went straight from the Marines to Berkeley, saw Frisbee, and became the first real Frisbee god. I mean, he was to me, and I think a lot of other people. And we had a tremendous, tremendous time playing with the Globetrotters. And that sort of was the time that Frisbee went from being nothing to, well, this could be something, because a lot of people saw it. You know, you're in all these cities, and all the Frisbee players that thought that they were alone, they saw, hey, this is a thing. And it sort of got the movement going.
Well,
Do that.
John, wouldn't you say that the Trotter Tour led to the Sports Illustrated piece? I mean, I don't think you get Sports Illustrated without the Trotters, right?
That's correct. And the Sports Illustrated piece was a really good one too. We had, especially since we got John Zimmerman, the photographer, to do some really cool shots of us. I think it was thought of, and this is, Stork knows this. Hedrick was the moving force at Whammo, and only two people I think ever really blew Hedrick's mind, and they were Tom Baudet back in '67, who showed Hedrick all kinds of stuff. Now Baudet was doing behind the back forehands before Victor was, but he didn't make it look like Victor. And when Ed saw Victor, it completely blew his mind, just absolutely. And we went to Ed and we said, hey, we should have a world championship. And he said, no, we tried that back in '68. It doesn't work. I don't think that Frisbee's ever really going to be a sport. It'd be nice. And yet, with perseverance, Dan and Jim Palmieri and a bunch of us were just saying the time is right. The time is right. We've got a Globetrotter tour coming up. We've had the first freestyle tournament up in Canada that Jim Kenner and Ken Westerfield won. They might have had a little bit of difficulty had Victor not dropped out at the last second, being my partner, to go do a Schmidt's beer commercial. But I digress. So we had the first world championship in '74. Then Victor and I went on the road for 200 cities in 180 days. Then Ed stepped down and Stork took over, and this little toy that kids just played with at the beach became a sport.
Well, and the cultural significance of the Globetrotters, a younger person can't possibly understand. There were no performers more respected than the Globetrotters.
True.
And when they tapped you guys to be part of their show, that's almost a holy grail of performing back then. It didn't get bigger than that. So their validation of you and Victor, there's no way that didn't just have a massive impact on everything. The trickle-down effect, there's no words to describe what that did for all of us.
It
All right,
was
Dan.
it was a catalyst for the growth of the sport.
There's no doubt. Dan, you said you were going to step out, and we're going to bring, I think John and I are going to hang out, and
Okay,
we have somebody, and I don't even know who's up next. So we're going to find out.
Okay.
Thanks,
I'll
Dan.
come in the front door and keep watching.
Okay, sounds good. All right, and, oh, there we go. That's better.
Hello.
Hello, well, Mr. D Dreamer, will you please introduce yourself and tell
Hi,
my younger audience who you are?
my name is John Wyand, and Vic and I started back in Berkeley in the late '60s. We started at Sproul Hall, Lower Sproul Hall. I used to be a drummer at Lower Sproul Hall, playing congas with C.C. Carter Collins, who played all the drums on Tim Buckley's album and other people's albums. He was a studio drummer. And I saw these guys in the background. Some were on bicycles, some were just throwing the disc around. And I realized that if I switched from drumming to Frisbee, I wouldn't have to carry these drums around, and I could have my requisite, break from studies at Berkeley. And I found that Frisbee really cleared my mind in between classes. So that became my go-to. And in those days, we were developing throws. So we were inventing throws. I invented the dream shot. I remember one day Chuck Pitt and I both came to the Lower Sproul and said, "Hey, look, I got a new throw." And we both were doing the finger flick that was featured in Cray's video, or Pat Rabdow's video, that was very famous, where he's doing this flip with his finger. So there were a lot of throws. I mean, there was I invented this one finger upside down throw that you can throw and the disc would flip over and then fly straight. So we were inventing things. We were trying to improve the Frisbee continually. Victor really should have been called the Dreamer, because he was the central force behind, Roger was also an inventor. He wasn't quite as athletic, but he invented MTA, Roger Barrett, the white crane. And so those days were really special for me. I even did an conceptual art piece when I switched to art, where Saul and I I just told the art teacher to look out the window on the field, which was like 3 stories up, and follow the line that the disc made. And that was the piece. Not what we were doing, but just follow the lines that the disc made in the flight. And so I got an A on that piece because the guy said he didn't really understand it, but he thought it was great. It was a conceptual piece. So we used to play a lot of golf. I used to caddy for my dad, so I knew all the golf rules. I was a tennis player, so I didn't really play the golf at the time. But that sort of developed into Frisbee golf. With the way we played it, which was a lot more fun, is you got to pick out your hole. So in other words, there were no set holes. Some holes were like, you had to land it in the middle of a plaza. There would be like a round circle, or you had to get it through this particular thing. But most of the time, you could just design your own hole with your foursome, and you would play that hole. The big problem was, of course, is people always wanted to pick up the disc and throw it back. Actually, you're playing on the campus of kids, and they're picking up the disc and they want to throw it back. And we're like, no, don't. We're playing golf. And they're like, what do you mean you're playing golf? So those were the early days. The freestyle was not a part of freestyle at all. I mean, it's part of Frisbee at all. It was something that was completely undreamt of, really, because people were, they were emphasized all the power things, MTA, distance, and guts. We even had a game called hockey, which was played with one guy was like a goalie between 2 upright pillars. And when I started throwing the dream shot, nobody could catch it. So that kind of destroyed that game. So everybody just stopped playing it. And I mean, I got a lot of pushback on that throw. Ed didn't want me to use it in distance. He didn't think the disc should fly upside down. I'm going to give you a little different perspective on Ed, because Ed really was an obstacle to the growth of the sport, as far as I'm concerned, in that young early years, because he always said, just like John said earlier, he always said, it's not going to be a sport. You guys are just freaks, because we would send him ideas how to improve the disc, or how to do this or how to do that. And Victor was, we were putting fan belts inside the disc. We were pressing hot ball bearings in there. We were trying all kinds of things. We were melting other discs inside of other discs, all to make it more stable. I mean, Frisbee changed so much when the disc started to become super stable, because up to that point, it was really a throwing sport, because the disc moved so much. It moved so much. You could big angles and turnovers and those kind of things could be accomplished, which you can't do today with the modern discs. Victor,
let me jump in here, because you're talking about the different things that could be done with the old Frisbees. We got a couple more clips
Okay.
Victor and many others. You may be on. You'll have to tell me if you're on these clips as well. You may be.
Well, I'm
But
the
I
guy
got a couple
throwing
clips of
behind his
Victor.
back.
What?
I'm the guy throwing behind his back in the MTA shots in that early American Dream sequence, or that dream.
Were you in that? Were you on the Great American Dream Machine shoot?
Oh yeah. I'm out throwing. I'm the one that's throwing. In fact, there's one great shot of me throwing a behind the back thumber skip shot, which I'm
cool.
sure nobody's ever seen, because it was something that only I could do. In fact, I tried to teach all these guys how to throw the dream shot, which is basically an upside down thumber, and Victor could never really get it. It's a hard shot because you have to get your head out of the way. You throw it right where your head is, and you get it out of the way. But Victor was the force behind moving everything forward. I would say that amongst our group, I mean, I was in school at Berkeley. Dave Book, Bob May, Chuck Pitt, double major. These guys worked at the radiation lab. They were all extremely well-educated academic types. And then there was Victor, who was a Marine from Brooklyn, who just showed up in, sharkskin suits, and all of a sudden adopted, the Berkeley look, the longer hair and the cut off shorts. But he was always a pretty traditional guy. He wasn't, I wouldn't call him, a super hippie guy at all. And, but his force of moving the sport forward, always pushing it, he just ignored what Ed said, and just, continued to move forward. And he always had a great relationship with Ed. And so that worked out really well for him, I think. And, my memories of Vic are, we spent so much time together. We never played Frisbee on the weekends. We played 2 games of softball Saturday, 2 games of softball on Sunday. That's what we did on the grass. We would not play Frisbee on the grass. We had to play Frisbee on hard surfaces because we were doing skip shots, question mark shots, rollers, and we were bouncing it, deflecting it off the buildings. In fact, just a quick side note, I went to MIT with my girlfriend at the time, who was doing an art installation, and I was throwing sidearms off the round tower there in the quad. And this guy came running out and said, "How do you do that? What are you doing?" That guy is John Kirkland. So I don't know if he remembers that, but that was...
I learned how to throw a forehand from Dreamer.
Bouncing it off the tower. I was throwing it at the tower. It would just smash into the tower and then drift back onto the field, and then I would catch it. So it was just kind of a one-man thing that I could do. But anyway, Victor had an incredible grip on the disc. He could squeeze the disc for his sidearm so hard that I was just always amazed. He would just dent the disc and was able to release it without any wobble, which I was very aware of, because when Stansel wrote his book, he came to me and he said, "I'd like to call when the disc wobbles the Wyand wobble." And I thought, well, that's not really complimentary, because we don't really want the disc to wobble, So I said, no, I pass on that, So I ended up with a PGA number of 608, which, because I refused to join the PDGA.
Okay.
But that's all.
All right, so let me jump in. We got a clip that you're gonna probably enjoy, Dreamer. Well, you both will, but this is from. Well, here, we'll take a look at it. Here we go.
Where's my Frisbee? I lost it. I got Three, 1, 2.
This one's the most fun because you can really get lost. You threw one and you're not quite sure which one was yours, but you have to run around and try to avoid stumbling over to everyone else that's also running around after their Frisbee. What happened to my Frisbee?
Bob May.
It's a good exercise.
Scott
It's a good excuse for just jumping around and flying through the air, and people won't think you're too crazy because there's a Frisbee between you. Those two guys are playing the Frisbee. They're flying through the air and acting pretty zany, but it's a lot of fun. And it only takes two people and about $1.90 for a Frisbee,
Okay,
That's me in the green
catches where
shorts.
a team of two people will stand 15 yards apart and at arm's length. And the idea is to get your Frisbee past the opponent.
Chuck Schultz.
Oh,
That's Victor. Chuck Schultz. Bob May.
What are you holding the Frisbees for? Throw the Frisbee.
Hey man, that blew my mind. I can't handle it.
Everyone fantasizes about flying. And the thing is, with a Frisbee, you can do that yourself. You can throw the Frisbee and watch it glide. You can run along underneath it as it falls slowly. You can put yourself right into the Frisbee. You can throw it out, but you're out there flying.
Brilliant.
Bob May.
You know what? What's really funny? I just thought about something. I was watching that video. Is I used to, when people would ask, why do you think, Frisbee players and disc golfers are such a unique and in my opinion, such a great group of people? And my theory has always been, if you're a grown-up adult who chooses to play with toys in the park in your free time, there's something about you that's a little different than the average adult that doesn't like playing with toys in the park. And watching that video is you guys were just a bunch of grown-ups playing with toys. It's so cool, man.
Yeah. It was a good time. I mean, Vic had this idea of pushing it out farther, so he said, let's write a letter to Charlie O'Finley for the Oakland A's. So I helped him write a letter. We wrote a nice letter, and he said, come down. And so we went down, kind of auditioned for him. And then when we went out before a Saturday game, you have to realize back then, I mean, there was very little we could do with the disc other than a bunch of different throws, a couple catches between the legs, behind the neck. But it was enough that at the end of the demo, Reggie Jackson comes running out of the dugout onto the field and rips the disc out of my hand. And he's this huge hulking guy. And he's like, got the disc, and he's just yelling. He's like saying, I didn't know you could do that with this. I didn't know you could do that with this, And then we went off the field. And so we felt it was a successful demo. And I think it was the first pro demo that led to, we ended up doing 49er games and Giant games. I'll never forget the first Giant game we did, because the first AstroTurf field was at the Candlestick, and the blades of grass were serrated because they were trying to match real grass. And so you would just kneel on the grass and you'd get this nasty burn. I mean, it was like, and I'm like, are you kidding? These guys are playing on this stuff. Eventually ripped it out and put in stuff that wasn't serrated, but I'll never forget that electric moment of kneeling down on that grass while we were playing Frisbee.
Love it. Dreamer, we're gonna jump to the next person.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking time to join us. It's such an honor. Well, me first, man. I got to tell you that it is such an honor to be with not just first generation players, but the generation before first generation, who are the pioneers who literally made up the throws that we use today. So, sir, thank you so much from me, from all of us.
I know Vic would really appreciate it. He, I think one of the things that Frisbee players have is they always need a little bit more appreciation than they're getting. That's a continual thing. So thank you so much for doing this. Thanks, John. I really.
Oh, wait, we didn't mean to kick you off. Wait, that was an accident. Hold on.
That's all I wanted to say was I call Stork the father of Frisbee, modern Frisbee, okay? Because he really had the overall picture and the connection to the players and everything that pushed it forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Peace.
Well said.
Who do we
Dreamer.
have next? Is this one more person? Two more people. Skippy.
Scott.
I have not talked
JK.
to you in so long. Kevin, Skippy Jammer, everybody. Please introduce yourself to the disc golf audience who might not know why you're so very important to disc sports, and then how you knew Victor.
Oh, well, I'm Kevin Givens, also known as Skippy Jammer, which is a whole nother story in and of itself. But it's great to see you, Scott. It has
Thank
been
you.
a long time. I'm glad you're back in the sport. We missed you, and it's long overdue. And I hope you're thriving and contributing as much as you can. So that's fantastic. John Kirkland, one of my longtime friends, mentors, collaborators, can't say enough about your contributions, both to the sport and to me personally. So JK, great to see you here.
And you, Skippy.
So I have a lot of stories, and when I heard that Victor had passed away, then of course we're all flush with these memories of somebody, certainly somebody as important as Victor was. And for me, it's I guess a personal journey, a personal story. I was coming of age in the agricultural town, cultural wasteland of Modesto, where there's a sign that's on the way into town. It says Modesto, on the way to where you're going, which infers that nobody in their right mind would actually be going to Modesto. You're obviously going somewhere else. You just happen to have to stop here to get gas or lunch or something like that. So that kind of gives you a sense of perspective about where we were coming from. I was spending a lot of time rock climbing in nearby Yosemite, but I kept falling, and there was consequences. Gravity and granite do not mix very well, and I started to realize that maybe there's other ways that I can apply my athleticism and youthful enthusiasm. And so we discovered Stancil Johnson's book, and the one saving grace about Modesto was the parks. They have a wonderful series of parks in Modesto, and so we would go to the local park and we would read through Stancil's book, and it would give us a guide on what to do. And then we went to the 1976 Indian Summer, which was, of course, a revelation. An actual Frisbee tournament, seeing all of these legends of the sport. And one of the things that was happening with me was coming out of this post-adolescent phase, you crave heroes. You need heroes, somebody that you can look up to, somebody that you can emulate, somebody that you can tap into for inspiration, that you can tap into for as a reference to a higher calling, if you will. Enter Victor Malafronte. So nearby Berkeley, about an hour away from Modesto, we would make the trip over to Sproul Plaza, and we would meet there for these weekend Frisbee sessions. The UFOs would come down from Sonoma, the San Francisco guys, Tony Zweig, Peter Martin, Dave Zazunas, they'd all come over from San Francisco. So we'd have a big to-do in Sproul Plaza, and we would do the things that Dreamer was describing and JK was describing. We'd throw against the South Hall to see how high up we could hit the building. We were doing skip shots. We were freestyling in Sproul Plaza. So we were doing all those activities, but then there's Victor, who is a larger than life figure. And I can't state that strongly enough. He had the charisma, he had the look, he had the game, he had this larger than life persona. And so we could look up to him and we could affix this hero worship to him. And he would receive it with such nonchalance that it would be no big deal to him. It was like, of course, I'm a Frisbee god, and it's nice to meet you as well. So it was that kind of an interaction, but he was very gracious. So he understood that we were the young bucks, we're the young guns, and we were comparing ourselves. Like I would see Evan David and Corey Basso and see how their games are progressing and comparing myself to these guys. And they're doing the same to me. And there's other people that we're all doing it to. And then there's Victor at a level way above us. And so he was always, again, so gracious to us and so accommodating. And all of us looked up to him in the same regard. And so a little further down the timeline, then there's this NAS Frisbee Festival in San Francisco. I think it was, what was it, May 15th, 1977. And there's a photo of me and JK doing a tipping contest that was in Frisbee World, and we're in the magazine. And then, so there was other activities. I can't remember what they were, but the big thing was distance at Speedway Meadow. And Victor steps up there, and there's a couple photos of me standing behind him holding a Lowenbrow dart, wearing a down jacket. And I'm standing there, I'm just observing this, soaking it all up. And Victor steps up, and he's got the macho sidewinder power throw, which none of us could do. We could do it like not a power throw. It would be some weak sauce little flick of our wrist that we're trying to look like him. But he, again, is a Frisbee god, and this is what he does. So he steps up, and he unleashes this throw with such force and such precision, and it takes off down the meadow. And I remember it very clearly, even to this day. It was, again, with such clarity. I see it going down the meadow with a steep hyzer release, and it goes up there and it crests and it flattens out and it starts to come back down, slowly come down to earth. Wow, beautiful throw. Puff of wind lifts it back up. Oh, wow. There it goes. Frisbees don't fly like this anymore. So the wind lifts it up. It starts coming down to earth again. Wow, what a throw. This is fantastic. A third puff of wind comes up and lifts it up and blows it out of sight, completely gone. And we're like, whoa, what was that? It's like the greatest throw that you could imagine. And to this day, it's still the singular greatest throw that I've ever seen in my life. And here it is, like 1977. I'm just getting done. I'm figuring, wow, this is going to happen all the time. But again, it was so absolutely remarkable that he did this. And I remember him turning to me, and I just go, nice throw, Vic. And he's like, thanks. Like, no big deal. He's a Frisbee god. This is what he does. And so it's just astonishing. So this is how he influenced me and got me to become a better Frisbee player, inspired me. I mean, I became obsessed for decades. I couldn't put a Frisbee down, and Victor was a big part of that. So now, decades later, I am endeavoring upon the work that needs to be done to create the Freestyle Hall of Fame. And we're going through this progression of worthy individuals, Kirkland, Malafronte, Westerfield, Roddick, all these great foundational players later, Haddockland, the Velasquez brothers, just going down the lineage of these great and fantastic players. And then I think it was 2018, the third wave of inductions, an interesting nomination comes in from this gentleman named Valentino Di Chiara. He's an Italian. He's from Milan. I start to read more about him, and I start to communicate back with him, going, okay, well, what's going on? And he's this old, frail guy, and he describes it to me. He comes to the San Francisco Bay Area in 1972. There's a cultural revolution that had just happened with the Summer of Love, the Berkeley riots. It's like it was ground zero for this whole consciousness raising phenomenon. He wanted to come and witness that. So he goes there, and he goes to San Francisco, goes to Haight-Ashbury, soaks it all up. And then, of course, he goes across the bay to UC Berkeley. And he just happens to go across Sproul Plaza, and he encounters the Berkeley Frisbee group, of which Victor is probably holding court. He goes back to Milan completely inspired by what he had seen. He didn't even speak to these guys. He just saw what was happening, blew his mind so much. He goes back to Milan, and he's like he's he's seen the Messiah. He's now spreading the joy of inspiration that he had just seen in Sproul Plaza. So he goes back and he becomes the grandfather of Frisbee in Europe. He puts on the first Frisbee tournaments over there, he organized the Italian Frisbee Federation. And it was all because of his encounter with Victor Malafronte and what Victor did to inspire him. And so it becomes this global phenomenon that wasn't intentional, but it's just, once again, if you're a Frisbee god, these things happen. So Victor Malafronte, I'm forever in his debt. Thank you, guys.
So Skippy, I got a great little video clip for you that Jen Velasquez was nice enough to set up for us with our segue.
Okay.
Because he mentions that Guts uses the Pro models.
Yep.
I wonder what Victor thought of that disc. Segue.
Let's see it. All right.
By the way, that throw was 538 feet.
Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. This is about, I believe, the Super Pro from Whammo. I don't know. You may not have seen this. This is the.
It was a great
I don't think
disc.
I've ever seen it.
That's
No,
what we
well,
use.
then we were about to.
That's the disc that we use with the Globetrotters.
Yep.
The Super Pro. You could see it better.
All right, here we go.
Bottom.
No, it's not on the screen yet. Oh, here we go. Oh, well, let's rewind it. Here we go. No sound.
That's cool.
All right, we're going to try again with sound. We're trying something new, which is bringing videos on the screen, which it's experimental with our platform. We're not pros at this, but we thought it was too good of an opportunity to pass up to try to get the videos of Victor. So
yeah,
we're getting some good clips.
Yeah,
you'll be super pros before too long.
Hey, by the way, so while we're segueing, talking about heroes, the very first Frisbee. Oh, here we go.
Super throws, super catches by champions, super flights by another winner. The new Super Pro Frisbee from Whammo. Super Pro Frisbee at stores everywhere.
Sponsored players. Yeah, and by the way, we'll put up links to all these. Every one we can get up, we'll put up links to them in full so you can share them in your social media, everybody. So the very first Frisbee shirt I believe I ever bought, meaning it wasn't a shirt I got at a tournament, was I owned a shirt in the early 90s called How to Spot a Beach Guidance Jammer. It was a Frisbee shirt with Skippy Jammer on it.
Yeah.
So when we talk about heroes, welcome to my club, Skippy.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Skippy. Oh, God, I love you, man. Thank you for all the work you're doing with the Freestyle Hall of Fame and preserving our sister sport, cousin sport. I'm not sure what you call it, but one of our family sports. Yeah. And we have one more person to bring on. Thank you, sir.
Before Skippy leaves, for the disc golfers out there, for quite a while, the course record at De La Viega was -12, held by Skippy Jammer. So he ain't just a freestyle act. Boy's got skills.
That is true.
Thank you, JK. Cheers, guys.
Yeah, thanks, man, so much. Thank you, Skippy. Love you. All right, we have one more person, and I don't think I know who the other person is, do I? Oh, wait, yeah, I do. Mr. Johnson,
Scott.
I see half of you.
Uh-oh. Well, here we go.
Man, I haven't seen you in how long?
About 2 weeks, but that was,
Has it been a whole 2 weeks
might have been about 2
since
weeks, Scott. It's
since
good
the
to see
last
you
time we
again.
hung out in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Please tell everybody who you are, and then how I know you played a big part in the history of Victor Malafronte, or the preservation of, but please share.
Well, Victor and I probably first met at the 1973 IFT International Frisbee Tournament, which was a meeting of the scattered tribes of Frisbee. So John and I and Doug McRae came from Boston. They were the humbly magnificent champions of the world from Michigan. There was the whole Berkeley Frisbee group, Roger Barrett and all from, obviously from Berkeley. And my really fond memory of meeting Victor was after all the competition was over. It was in the evening, a beautiful, calm evening. We did this MTA. These guys, I think, invented MTA out there in the West Coast. And the way it was done was everybody threw at once, and it was a 3-2-1 throw. And when you caught the disc, you said, okay, you yelled it. And if you won that particular competition, you threw it, you counted down and threw it and so forth. And it was just a fun, just sort of a meeting of people from all over who had never done this before. I had never heard of MTA before, let alone done it. So that's just a fond memory of first meeting Victor. And everything Skippy says was more or less what I wanted to say about him when it comes to the kind of guy that Victor was. He had that charisma. He had that sort of Italian machismo to him. He had hubris, but he didn't. He wasn't one of those people. He's one of those people who was inclusive with all of that, shall we say, talent and charisma. And he sort of was self-referential. He realized that he was sort of, over the top in a nice kind of way, and he was really a very kind person to, as Skippy was saying, to people who are coming up in the sport like me and that kind of thing. So Victor used to always say, to Victor go the spoils. I think probably John will remember that, etc. So the next real important meeting of Victor and myself was probably at the 1974 Octad, which Dan, hi Dan, and Flash Kingsley put on in Rutgers, New Jersey, and John and I were there, and that was another meeting of that was our first real competition, overall competition. It had a sort of a freestyle guts thing that turned into a guts thing. So that was the last time that was ever done. So it was kind of like freestyle with the pig's lipstick on it. So there's a lot of experimental kinds of events that were done during that. And of course, there was the distance competition. And Victor and a few other people had a disc I'd never seen before. John, I don't know if you'd seen it before, but it was one of these. That's the CPI All-Star Saucer Tosser. And we were throwing the Whammo Pros. That was the big distance disc of the day. And all of a sudden, these saucer tossers, people were throwing these, and I didn't have one. So I went up to Victor and I said, Victor, will you lend me one of yours? He kind of looked at me funny, and he did. And then he threw. It was a real chilly day with a real strong wind, and Victor broke the world record. But unfortunately, I came up after him about 5 minutes later and broke his world record by about 5 feet. And I don't know if Victor ever totally forgave me. 3 feet, was that what it was, John? Well, time makes everything exaggerated. But anyway, I don't know what Victor did. I asked him when we were collaborating on the complete book of Frisbee, Victor, what'd you do with that Frisbee? And he didn't know. He had no idea. What I suspect what he did is under a full moon, he had a ritual burning of it. That's just my speculation. But anyway, Victor and I, we through all those early years of competition, Rose Bowl and times like that, we certainly competed together. But our friendship became a lot closer in the late 1990s when Victor had this idea of putting together the ultimate book of Frisbee, and he called it the Complete Book of Frisbee. Now, Victor was an incredible researcher. I have right here stuff, I still have it. These are all various volumes of books that, or gatherings of research and things like that he sent to me. So he was working from California and I was working from here in New England, and we essentially emailed each other, talked to each other by phone, and he would send me rough drafts and a lot of unorganized material. And me being an English major, I was able to pull it together and turn it into a narrative. And so we had this really great collaboration on the book, and it's to this day, I think, an important reference for people who read it. And he also came out here for about a week. He stayed with us here in Munson, Mass, for about a week. And one of the things we did that I have a real fond memory of was that we split up 150 pie tins that somehow Victor had found from California, and we bought them together. We paid maybe I can't remember what it was, but it was it was certainly worth getting them. And we split them up, and he would say, "Okay, I want this one, and you want this one." So we did so without much argumentation. He was a true gentleman. And another illustration of that was there's a mile stretch in Brimfield, Massachusetts, which is about 20 minutes from here. And every 3 times a year, they have this enormous antique flea market that goes up both sides of the road. And there's a couple of that's where I found my pie case and numerous tins and a cascading pie stand. And so it's been really good for finding historical Frisbee treasures, Frisbee Pie Company treasures. But anyway, I said, "Hey, Victor, let's go down and check out, just for the heck of it, just check out an antique store." This was off season. There was no show going on, but we walk into this antique store. And the first thing I spot is, of all things, a Frisbee pie case. And the possibility of doing that, these are rarer than anything. And so it was one of those Frisbee serendipity moments. We picked it up, and Victor, being the gentleman, insisted, "Hey, you saw it first, it's yours." So he was a true gentleman that way. And I really have fond memories of collaborating with him on the book. And he was just such when he wanted something, he would go out and get it. And if he knew he didn't have the resources for something, he'd find somebody else who did. So he found me to write the book and turn it into a narrative. And he had all this incredible research, a lot of new stuff that I'd never known about the company, and about all sorts of collectible discs that are still in that book. And of course, people ask, what are they worth today? Are they worth the same? Are they worth less, more, that kind of thing? But anyway, Victor and I had talked by phone and email a few times over the last few years, and I'm really sorry I didn't get to see him one more time again. And I really appreciate Scott and everybody else who's contributed to putting this remembrance together, because he was a special guy.
Yeah, I talked to Dan, and then everybody jumped in and sent pictures and videos.
Yeah.
And he was Victor. He mattered.
He did. He really, he and John they pestered Ed Hedrick. I think they convinced Ed Hedrick to turn a toy into a sporting good. And the rest is history. We're all here today because I think John and Victor and a few others were hanging around. What was the St. Gabriel? Is that where it was, John? They were hanging around the Whammo factory there and pestering Ed, because Ed was the head honcho. And Ed got convinced, and of course that took off. He got the whole disc golf thing going with the pole hole and the invention of that, and the rest is history. But it was just this whole little, he had to have somebody sticking prodding him a little bit to get that whole thing going. And John and Victor, and I also think they got so many discs out of that factory that are one of a kind we'll never see again. But John, you have a few of those in your collection, right?
I don't know how many Victor got, but I needed help carting them out.
Well, was Victor the first person, and if so, every single modern disc golf pro should appreciate this, but was Victor not the first person to sign a disc and have that signature printed in the hot stamp with royalties, right? He's the first. Wasn't he the first signature?
I think the four signature disc was, but that was put out officially by Whammo. I don't know.
The first signature discs ever were the Globetrotters fastbacks that had mine and Victor's signature on them.
Yeah, I have one of those.
Yeah, they had
Amazing.
And I was the world distance champion in '74, and Victor was the world overall champion, which was the world class test in those days. By the way, this fellow, Davis Johnson, is a very modest exemplar of early excellence. He was the first guy to throw over 400 feet. He got 412 silver dollars. That's not an easy thing to do with a disc, except for like Victor had that weird thing where it got lifted. Strange flights of fancy aside, this guy, personally, he was the first guy I ever ran into that could throw farther than I could. And he won the 75 world championship in distance. So when he's talking about stuff, you can listen to him. He's a powerhouse distance thrower.
Not well. I joke that I had John in the early years with the old plastic, but as soon as the new plastic came out, he learned to get that nose down, and I'm still working on it.
Well, every single person, and I have always tried to be so clear with every about this. Anything I've ever accomplished, especially with distance or with sidearm, I'm merely the torchbearer. I didn't invent any of it. I simply took the torch from the people before me, got to run with it for a little bit, enjoyed every second of it, and then passed that torch along to the next person to carry. But Victor, there's some people that lit the torch. There are people that lit that torch first.
A lot farther than we did, I'll say that.
Yeah, Scott, you're the. I was the first guy to throw over 300. You're the first guy to throw over 400, and Scott was the first guy to throw over 200 meters.
And let's not forget Bob May, who really got it all started. He was the legend with the Berkeley Frisbee group, who John, you guys knew well. Victor knew well, and he was the guy I heard about when I was in college, throwing in the quadrangle and skipping class back in 1972. And so Bob May too. It goes back and it goes forward, and I remember seeing Scott. Scott came and did a demo at Buffinville, which is one of our Corps of Engineers disc golf courses, and he took a sidearm disc, and there was this huge gully where the river flowed into the dam area, huge gully, and there was a pole hole across the gully. He took his sidearm, he flipped it out real easy, and it just sailed across there. And it was about a whole bunch of New England Frisbee players were there. Having Scott Stokely on hand was to do a demo was a big deal. And Scott just tossed that with that beautiful sidearm, and it landed by the basket. And we all, I remember it to this day. So we may have started.
I'm blown away that you're even talking about something I did in the same conversation as things Victor Malafronte did. Thank you.
Well,
John, we said we would go over that to given. You have about 1 million good Frisbee stories. Do you have a favorite Victor story?
There were so many things that we did. When we did so many different TV shows. I remember. I mean, I just remember lots of things about Victor, but we did something. We did a lot of TV shows. We met all these really cool people, all these basketball players. It was really the most exciting time of my life. And I was friends with Victor all these years. I talked to him several times this year. He was doing well. I mean, he was happy and everything was fine. This passing was very unexpected. And some of the great stories about Victor, unfortunately, aren't allowed to be purveyed in this medium. But let me just tell you, he had
I know some of those
really
stories. I
big
won't share them
hands.
either.
He had big hands. He could palm a master Frisbee. So that helped him when he was, like John was saying, how tightly he could grip it. He was a freak of nature, that guy. I remember him saying one time, if it weren't for Frisbee, I'd be small change somewhere. But
Yeah.
fortunately, there was Frisbee, and he's not small change.
No.
No. Well, I will share one final story of Victor. I wrote about this in my book. It's maybe a bit of trivia, because I've taught a lot of special needs classes. It's been a passion of mine to teach people with special needs disc golf. The very first person I ever taught a special needs class with was Victor. Victor and I went out to a summer camp just north of Berkeley, and we taught my very first, but for me, it was my first special needs class that I didn't appreciate as a younger man, but as I got older, that certainly planted the seeds for things that were important to me later in my life. And so Victor will always be the first person I ever taught a special needs class with.
That's great.
And that's really admirable that you're doing that. People that take their time to reach out and help other folks, very selfless, and the sport's glad you're doing that, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I think we'll wrap it up. I have something. No, I have one more clip. We got a clip of Victor throwing distance. We want to end with a clip, and then we have a message because Victor's family, a number of people in Victor's family have expressed our appreciation for everybody here that's participated in sharing Victor and what he meant to all of us. And his brother wrote something up really nice for Victor. And I was going to just put it on the screen because I was afraid I would have difficulty reading it. And I decided I'm going to go ahead and read it. But first, let's look at a fun clip of Victor before we get to the serious stuff. All right.
Victor Malafronte has one of the finest sidearm throws in the game, and he gets the first one out pretty well. Larry gives a few pointers.
I know how important it is for you, senor. It's only your career. All right, go on to Victor there and see what he can do in the second one. Here, put a little pressure on him.
Vic lets it go. That one's a little better and should put him in the running. They'll mark it at just over 80 yards. Victor wants it back farther. There's the one. That'll be out there, and he knows it.
All right. So I want to bring something up on the screen. This is because a lot of people watch these while driving or the audio while doing other things. So I do want to read this so everybody can read. Oh, if I can. I'm not sure I can read it. It's a little bit small for me. So thank you. This is from Victor's brother and family. Oh, I have a larger screen being brought to me. Amazing. Thank you so much. These don't help. All right. From Victor's brother and the family of Victor Malafronte to the Frisbee community. So this is for every single one of you. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for honoring Victor Malafronte. Your recognition of his contributions, passion, and love for the game means the world to us. Victor dedicated much of his life to advancing this sport, sharing its joy with others, and creating lasting memories with this incredible community. The celebration of his legacy is a reminder of the deep connections and camaraderie that make the Frisbee world so special. We are truly moved by your kindness, respect, and the stories you've shared about how he impacted your lives. Thank you for keeping his spirit alive and for continuing to grow the sport he cherished. With gratitude and love, the family of Victor Malafronte.
That's great.
Thank you to the family of Victor Malafronte for sharing the world with Victor. Thank you to everybody that took the time to join tonight. Obviously, Davis, Skippy, John, Z, and Stork, but of course, everybody in the Frisbee family. If you're new to the sport and you were looking at the comments, there was a who's who of absolute legends that came in and said hi and joined us. Thank you to all of you. I'll leave you with one thing. Be sure to let your heroes know that they were your heroes. I was fortunate enough to let Victor know last time I spoke to him. It had been about 2 years, but the last time I spoke to Victor, I told him how much he meant to me. And I can tell you that makes his passing a tiny bit easier. So our heroes are still with us, some of them. Let them know while we have them. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I love you, Victor Malafronte.